part in those which a knight or an esquire should have. For that she was fair of favor, and yet in her first youth and adroit and robust of her person. Nor was there aught that pertaineth unto a woman, such as works of broidery and silk and the like, but she did it better than any other of her sex. Moreover, said he, there was no sewer, or in other words, no serving man, alive who served better or more deftly at a nobleman's table than did she. For that she was very well bred and exceeding wise and discreet. He after went on to extol her as knowing better how to ride a horse and fly a hawk, to read and write and cast a reckoning than if she were a merchant. And thence, after many other commendations, coming to that whereof it had been discoursed among them, he avouched with an oath that there could be found no honester nor chaster woman than she. Wherefore he firmly believed that, should he abide 60 years, or even always from home, she would never incline to the least levity with another man. Among the merchants who discoursed thus was a young man called Ambrogiulo of Piacenza, who fell to making the greatest mock in the world of this last commendation bestowed by Bernabo upon his wife, and asked him scoffingly if the emperor had granted him that privilege over and above all other men. Bernabo, some little nettled, replied that not the emperor, but God, who could somewhat more than the emperor, had vouchsafed him the favor in question. Whereupon quoth Ambrogiulo, Bernabo, I doubt not a whit but that thou thinkest to say sooth. But meseemeth thou hast paid little regard to the nature of things. For that, hadst thou taken heed thereunto, I deem thee not so dull of wit, but thou wouldst have noted therein certain matters which had made thee speak more circumspectly on this subject. And that thou mayst not think that we, who have spoken much at large of our wives, believe that we have wives other or otherwise made than thine, but mayst see that we spoke thus, moved by natural perception. I will e'en reason with thee a little on this matter. I have always understood man to be the noblest animal created of God among mortals, and after him, woman. But man, as is commonly believed and as is seen by works, is the more perfect, and having more perfection, must without fail have more of firmness and constancy, for that women universally are more changeable. The reason whereof might be shown by many natural arguments, which for the present I purpose to leave be. If then man be of more stability and yet cannot keep himself, let alone from complying with a woman who soliciteth him, but even from desiring one who pleaseth him, nay more, from doing what he can, so he may avail to be with her, and if this betide him not once a month, but 1,000 times a day, what canst thou expect a woman, naturally unstable, to avail against the prayers, the blandishments, the gifts, and 1,000 other means which an adroit man, who loveth her, will use? Thinkest thou she can hold out? Certes, how much soever thou mayst affirm it, I believe not that thou believest it. And thou thyself sayst that thy wife is a woman, and that she is of flesh and blood, as are other women. If this be so, those same desires must be hers, and the same powers that are in other women to resist these natural appetites. Wherefore, however honest she be, it is possible she may do that which other women do. And nothing that is possible she be so peremptorily denied, nor the contrary thereof affirmed with such rigor as thou dost. To which Bernabo made answer, saying, I am a merchant and not a philosopher, and as a merchant I will answer. And I say that I acknowledge that what thou sayst may happen to foolish women in whom there is no shame. But those who are discreet are so careful of their honor that for the guarding thereof they become stronger than men, who reck not of this. And of those thus fashioned is my wife. Indeed, rejoined Ambrogiulo, if for every time they occupy themselves with toys of this kind, there sprouted from their foreheads a horn to bear witness of that which they have done, there be few, I believe, who would incline thereto. But far from the horn sprouting, there appeareth neither trace nor token thereof in those who are discreet, and shame and soil of honor consist not but in things discovered. Wherefore, weenas they may secretly, they do it, or, if they forbear, it is for stupidity. And have thou this for certain that she alone is chaste, who hath either never been solicited of any, or who, having herself solicited, hath not been hearkened. And although I know by natural and true reasons that it is e'en as I say, yet should I not speak thereof with so full an assurance, had I not many a time, and with many women made essay thereof. And this I tell thee, that, were I near this most sanctified wife of thine, I warrant me I would in brief space of time bring her to that which I have already gotten of other women. Whereupon quoth Bernabo, disputing with words might be prolonged without end, Thou wouldst say, and I should say, and in the end it would all amount to nothing. But since thou wilt have it that all women are so compliant, and that thine address is such, I am content, so I may certify thee of my wife's honesty, to have my head cut off, and thou canst anywise avail to bring her to do thy pleasure in aught of the kind. And if thou fail thereof, I will have thee lose no other what than 1,000 gold florins. Bernabo, replied Ambrogiulo, who was now grown heated over the dispute, I know not what I should do with thy blood, if I won the wager. But an thou have a mind to see proof of that which I have advanced, do thou stake 5,000 gold florins of thy moneys, which should be less dear to thee than thy head, against 1,000 of mine. And whereas thou settest no limit, I will e'en bind myself to go to Genoa, and within 3 months from the day of my departure hence to have done my will of thy wife, and to bring back with me, in proof thereof, sundry of her most precious things, and such, and so many tokens that thou shalt thyself confess it to be truth, so verily thou wilt pledge me thy faith not to come to Genoa within that term, nor write her aught of the matter. Bernabo said that it liked him well, and albeit the other merchants endeavored to hinder the affair, foreseeing that sore mischief might come thereof, the two merchants' minds were so inflamed that, in despite of the rest, they bound themselves one to other by express writings under their hands. This done, Bernabo abode behind, whilst Ambrogiulo, as quickly as he might, betook himself to Genoa. There he abode some days, and informing himself with the utmost precaution of the name of the street, where the lady dwelt, and of her manner of life, understood of her that, and more than that which he had heard of her from Bernabo, wherefore him seemed he was come on a fool's errand. However, he presently clapped up an acquaintance with a poor woman, who was much about the house and whose great well-wisher the lady was, and availing not to induce her to aught else, he debauched her with money and prevailed with her to bring him, in a chest wrought after a fashion of his own, not only into the house, but into the gentlewoman's very bedchamber, where, according to the ordinance given her of him, the good woman commended it to her care for some days, as if she had a mind to go some with her. The chest, then being left in the chamber and the night come, Ambrogiulo, what time he judged the lady to be asleep, opened the chest with certain engines of his and came softly out into the chamber, where there was a light burning, with whose aid he proceeded to observe the ordinance of the place, the paintings and every other notable thing that was therein, and fixed them in his memory. Then drawing near the bed and perceiving that the lady and a little girl, who was with her, were fast asleep, he softly altogether uncovered the former, and found that she was as fair naked as clad, but saw no sign about her that he might carry away, save one, to wit, a mole which she had under the left pap, and about which were sundry little hairs as red as gold. This noted, he covered her softly up again, albeit, seeing her so fair, he was tempted to adventure his life and lay himself by her side. However, for that he had heard her to be so obdurate and uncomplying in matters of this kind, he hazarded not himself, but, abiding at his leisure in the chamber the most part of the night, took from one of her coffers a purse and a nightrail, together with sundry rings and girdles, and laying them all in his chest, returned thither himself and shut himself up therein as before. And on this wise he did 2 nights, without the lady being ware of aught. On the 3rd day the good woman came back for the chest, according to the given ordinance, and carried it off whence she had taken it, whereupon Ambrogiulo came out, and having rewarded her according to promise, returned, as quickly as he might, with the things aforesaid, to Paris, where he arrived before the term appointed. There he summoned the merchants who had been present at the dispute and the laying of the wager, and declared, in Bernabo's presence, that he had won the wager laid between them, for that he had accomplished that whereof he had vaunted himself. And to prove this to be true, he first described the fashion of the chamber and the paintings thereof, and after showed the things he had brought with him thence, avouching that he had them of herself. Bernabo confessed the chamber to be, as he had said, and owned, moreover, that he recognized the things in question as being in truth his wife's, but said that he might have learned from one of the servants of the house the fashion of the chamber, and have gotten the things in like manner. Wherefore, and he had naught else to say, him seemed not that this should suffice to prove him to have one. Whereupon quoth Ambrogiulo, in sooth this should suffice, but, since thou wilt have me say more, I will say it. I tell thee that Madame Ginevra thy wife hath under her left pap a pretty big mole, about which are maybe 6 little hairs as red as gold. When Bernabo heard this, It was as if he had gotten a knife thrust in the heart, such anguish did he feel, and though he had said not a word, his countenance, being all changed, gave very manifest token that what Ambrogio said was true. Then, after a while, "Gentlemen," quoth he, "that which Ambrogio saith is true. Wherefore, he having won, let him come whensoever it pleaseth him, and he shall be paid." Accordingly, on the ensuing day Ambrogio was paid in full, and Bernabo, departing Paris, betook himself to Genoa with fell intent against the lady. When he drew near the city, he would not enter therein, but lighted down a good score miles away at a country house of his, and dispatched one of his servants, in whom he much trusted, to Genoa with 2 horses and letters under his hand, advising his wife that he had returned and bidding her come to him. And he privily charged the man, weenas he should be with the lady in such place as should seem best to him, to put her to death without pity and return to him. The servant accordingly repaired to Genoa, and delivering the letters and doing his errand, was received with great rejoicing by the lady, who on the morrow took horse with him and set out for their country house. As they fared on together, discoursing of one thing and another, they came to a very deep and lonely valley, beset with high rocks and trees, which seeming to the servant a place wherein he might, with assurance for himself, do his lord's commandment, he pulled out his knife and taking the lady by the arm said, "Madam, commend your soul to God, for needs must you die without faring farther." The lady, seeing the knife and hearing these words, was all dismayed and said, "Mercy, for God's sake. Ere thou slay me, tell me wherein I have offended thee, that thou wouldst put me to death." "Madam," answered the man, "me you have nowise offended, but wherein you have offended your husband I know not, save that he hath commanded me slay you by the way, without having any pity upon you, threatening me, and I did it not, to have me hanged by the neck. You know well how much I am beholden to him, and how I may not gainsay him in aught that he may impose upon me. God knoweth it irketh me for you, but I can no otherwise." Whereupon quoth the lady, weeping, "Alack, for God's sake, consent not to become the murderer of one who hath never wronged thee, to serve another. God, who knoweth all, knoweth that I never did aught for which I should receive such a recompense from my husband. But let that be. Thou mayst and thou wilt at once content God and thy master and me on this wise, to wit, that thou take these my clothes and give me but thy doublet and a hood, and with the former return to my lord and thine, and tell him that thou hast slain me. And I swear to thee, by that life which thou wilt have bestowed on me, that I will remove hence and get me gone into a country, whence never shall any news of me win either to him, or to thee, or into these parts." The servant, who was loath to slay her, was lightly moved to compassion. Wherefore he took her clothes and give her a sorry doublet of his and a hood, leaving her sundry moneys she had with her. Then praying her depart the country, he left her in the valley and afoot and betook himself to his master, to whom he avouched that not only was his commandment accomplished, but that he had left the lady's dead body among a pack of wolves, and Bernabo presently returned to Genoa, where the thing becoming known, he was much blamed. As for the lady, she abode alone and disconsolate till nightfall, when she disguised herself as most she might, and repaired to a village hard by, where, having gotten from an old woman that which she needed, she fitted the doublet to her shape and, shortening it, made a pair of linen breeches of her shift. Then, having cut her hair and altogether transformed herself in the guise of a sailor, she betook herself to the seashore, where, as chance would have it, she found a Catalan gentleman, by name Senner and Cararc, who had landed at Alba from a ship he had in the offing, to refresh himself at a spring there. With him she entered into parley, and engaging with him as a servant, embarked on board the ship, under the name of Sicurano de Finale. There, being furnished by the gentleman with better clothes, she proceeded to serve him so well and so aptly that she became in the utmost favor with him. No great while after it befell that the Catalan made a voyage to Alexandria with a lading of his, and carrying thither certain peregrine falcons for the Soldan, presented them to him. The Soldan, having once and again entertained him at meat, and noting with approof the fashions of Sicurano, who still went serving him, begged him of his master, who yielded him to him, although it irked him to do it, and Sicurano, in a little while, by his good behavior, gained the love and favor of the Soldan, even as he had gained that of the Catalan. Wherefore, in process of time, it befell that the time coming for a great assemblage in the guise of a fair, of merchants, both Christian and Saracen, which was wont at a certain season of the year to be held in Acre. a town under the seigneury of the Soldan, and to which, in order that the merchants and their merchandise might rest secure, the latter was still used to dispatch, besides other his officers, some one of his chief men, with troops, to look to the guard he bethought himself to send Sicurano, who was by this well versed in the language of the country, on the service, and so he did. Sicurano accordingly came to Acre as governor and captain of the guard of the merchants, and their merchandise, and their well and diligently doing that which pertained to his office, and going round looking about him, saw many merchants there, Sicilians and Pisans and Genoese and Venetians and other Italians, with whom he was fain to make acquaintance, in remembrance of his country. It befell, one time amongst others, that, having lighted down at the shop of certain Venetian merchants, he espied among other trinkets a purse and a girdle, which he straightway knew for having been his and marveled thereat. But without making any sign, he carelessly asked to whom they pertained, and if they were for sale. Now Ambrogiulo of Piacenza was come thither with much merchandise on board a Venetian ship, and hearing the captain of the guard ask whose the trinkets were, came forward and said, laughing, "Sir, the things are mine and I do not sell them. But, if they please you, I will gladly give them to you." Sicurano, seeing him laugh, misdoubted he had recognized him by some gesture of his, but yet keeping a steady countenance, he said, "Belike thou laughest to see me, a soldier, go questioning of these women's toys." "Sir," answered Ambrogiulo, "I laugh not at that, nay, but at the way I came by them." "Marry then," said Sicurano, "and it be not unspeakable, tell me how thou gottest them, so God give thee good luck." Quoth Ambrogiulo, "Sir, a gentlewoman of Genoa, hight Madame Ginevra, wife of Bernabo Lomellini, gave me these things, with certain others, one night that I lay with her, and prayed me keep them for the love of her. Now I laugh for that I mind me of the simplicity of Bernabo, who was fool enough to lay 5,000 florins to one that I would not bring his wife to do my pleasure. The which I did and won the wager, whereupon he, who should rather have punished himself for his stupidity than her for doing that which all women do, returned from Paris to Genoa, and there, by what I have since heard, caused her put to death." Sicurano, hearing this, understood forthwith what was the cause of Bernabo's anger against his wife, and manifestly perceiving this fellow to have been the occasion of all her ills, determined not to let him go unpunished therefore. Accordingly, he feigned to be greatly diverted with the story, and artfully clapped up a straight acquaintance with him, insomuch that, the fair being ended, Ambrogiulo, at his instance, accompanied him with all his good to Alexandria. Here Sicurano let build him a warehouse and lodged in his hand store of his own moneys, and Ambrogiulo, foreseeing great advantage to himself, willingly took up his abode there. Meanwhile, Sicurano, careful to make Bernabo clear of his innocence, rested not till, by means of certain great Genoese merchants who were then in Alexandria, he had, on some plausible occasion of his own devising, caused him come thither, where finding him in poor enough case, he had him privily entertained by a friend of his against it should seem to him time to do that which he purposed. Now he had already made Ambrogiulo recount his story before the Soldan for the latter's diversion. But seeing Bernabo there, and thinking there was no need to use farther delay in the matter, he took occasion to procure the Soldan to have Ambrogiulo and Bernabo brought before him, and in the latter's presence, to extort from the former, by dint of severity, and it might not easily be done the truth of that, whereof he vaunted himself concerning Bernabo's wife. Accordingly, they both being come, the Soldan, in the presence of many, with a stern countenance commanded Ambrogiulo to tell the truth how he had one of Bernabo the 5,000 gold florins. And Sicurano himself, in whom he most trusted, with a yet angrier aspect, threatened him with the most grievous torments, and he told it not. Whereupon Ambrogiulo, affrighted on one side and another, and in a measure constrained, in the presence of Bernabo and many others, plainly related everything, even as it passed, expecting no worse punishment therefore than the restitution of the 5,000 gold florins and of the stolen trinkets. He having spoken, Sicurano, as he were the Soldan's minister in the matter, turned to Bernabo and said to him, "And thou, what didst thou to thy lady for this lie?" Whereto Bernabo replied, "Overcome with wrath for the loss of my money, and with resentment for the shame which meseemed I had got from my wife, I caused a servant of mine put her to death, and according to that which he reported to me, she was straightway devoured by a multitude of wolves. These things said in the presence of the Soldan, and all heard and apprehended of him, albeit he knew not yet to what end Sicurano, who had sought and ordered this, would fain come. The latter said to him, "My lord, you may very clearly see how much reason yonder poor lady had to vaunt herself of her gallant and her husband, for that the former at once bereaved her of honor, marring her fair fame with lies, and despoiled her husband, whilst the latter, more credulous of others' falsehoods than of the truth which he might by long experience have known, caused her to be slain and eaten of wolves. And moreover, such is the goodwill and the love borne her by the one and the other that, having long abidden with her, neither of them knoweth her. But that you may the better apprehend that which each of these hath deserved, I will so but you vouchsafe me, of special favour to punish the deceiver, and pardon the dupine cause her come hither into your and their presence." The Soldan, disposed in the matter altogether to comply with Sicurano's wishes, answered that he would well, and bade him produce the lady. Whereat Bernabo marvelled exceedingly, for that he firmly believed her to be dead, whilst Ambrogiulo, now divining his danger, began to be in fear of worse than paying of moneys, and knew not whether more to hope or to fear from the coming of the lady, but awaited her appearance with the utmost amazement. The Soldan, then, having accorded Sicurano his wish, the latter threw himself, weeping, on his knees before him, and putting off, as it were at one and the same time, his manly voice and masculine demeanor, said, "My lord, I am the wretched misfortunate Ginevra, who have these 6 years gone wandering in man's disguise about the world, having been foully and wickedly aspersed by this traitor Ambrogiulo, and given by yonder cruel and unjust man to one of his servants to be slain and eaten of wolves." Then, tearing open the fore part of her clothes and showing her breast, she discovered herself to the Soldan and all else who were present, and after, turning to Ambrogiulo, indignantly demanded of him when he had ever lain with her, according as he had aforetime boasted. But he, now knowing her and fallen well nigh dumb for shame, said nothing. The Soldan, who had always held her a man, seeing and hearing this, fell into such a wonderment that he more than once misdoubted that which he saw and heard to be rather a dream than true. However, after his amazement had abated, apprehending the truth of the matter, he lauded to the utmost the life and fashions of Ginevra, till then called Sicurano, and extolled her constancy and virtue. And letting bring her very sumptuous woman's apparel and women to attend her, he pardoned Bernabo in accordance with her request the death he had merited, whilst the latter, recognizing her, cast himself at her feet, weeping and craving forgiveness, which she, ill worthy as he was thereof, graciously accorded him, and raising him to his feet, embraced him tenderly as her husband. Then the Soldan commanded that Ambrogiulo should incontinent be bound to a stake, and smeared with honey, and exposed to the sun in some high place of the city, nor should ever be loosed thence till such time as he should fall of himself. And so was it done. After this, he commanded that all that had belonged to him should be given to the lady, the which was not so little, but that it outvalued 10,000 doubloons. Moreover, he let make a very goodly banquet, wherein he entertained Bernabo with honor, as Madame Ginevra's husband, and herself as a very valiant lady, and gave her, in jewels and vessels of gold and silver and moneys, that which amounted to better than other 10,000 doubloons. Then, the banquet over, he caused equip them a ship, and gave them leave to return at their pleasure to Genoa, whither accordingly they returned with great joyance and exceeding rich. And there they were received with the utmost honor, especially Madame Ginevra, who was of all believed to be dead, and who, while she lived, was still reputed of great worth and virtue. As for Ambrogiulo, being that same day bounded to the stake and anointed with honey, he was, to his exceeding torment, not only slain, but devoured of the flies and wasps and gadflies, wherewith that country aboundeth, even to the bones, which latter, waxed white and hanging by the sinews, being left unremoved, long bore witness of his villainy to all who saw them. And on this wise did the deceiver abide at the feet of the deceived. Footnote 132, lit. Whatsoever an ass giveth against a wall, such he receiveth, quale asinodun perit, tal risp. I cannot find any satisfactory explanation of this proverbial saying, which may be rendered in two ways, according as quale and tale are taken as relative to a thing or a person. The probable reference seems to be to the circumstance of an ass making water against a wall, so that his urine returns to him. Footnote 133. From this point until the final discovery of her true sex, the heroine is spoken of in the masculine gender, as became her assumed name and habit. Footnote 134. Here Boccaccio uses the feminine pronoun, immediately afterward resuming the masculine form in speaking of Sicurano. The 10th story. Piagianino of Monaco Stleth away the wife of Messer, Rixardo 501 Chinzca. WHO, learning where She is, goeth thither and making friends with Piagianino. Dmandth her again of Him. The latter concdth her to Him, She will. But She refuseth to return with Him and Messer Rixardo dying, Sheb cometh the wife of Piagianino. Each of the honorable company highly commended for goodly the story told by their queen, especially Dionio, with whom alone for that present day it now rested to tell, and who, after many praises bestowed upon the preceding tale, said, Fair ladies, one part of the queen's story hath caused me change counsel of telling you one that was in my mind, and determined to tell you another end, that is the stupidity of Bernabo, albeit good betided him thereof, and of all others who give themselves to believe that which he made a show of believing, and who, to wit, whilst going about the world, diverting themselves now with this woman and now with that, imagine that the ladies left at home abide with their hands in their girdles, as if we knew not, we who are born and reared among the latter, unto what they are fain. In telling you this story, I shall at once show you how great is the folly of these folk, and how greater yet is that of those who, deeming themselves more potent than nature herself, think by dint of sophistical inventions to avail unto that which is beyond their power, and study to bring others to that which they themselves are, weenas the complexion of those on whom they practice brooketh it not. Footnote 140, lit. Fabulous demonstrations, demonstrazioni fabulos, casuistical arguments, founded upon premises of their own invention. There was, then, in Pisa a judge, by name Messer Rixardo di Cinzica, more gifted with wit than with bodily strength, who, thinking belike to satisfy a wife by the same means which served him to dispatch his studies, and being very rich, sought with no little diligence to have a fair and young lady to wife. Whereas, had he but known to counsel himself as he counselled others, he should have shunned both the one and the other. The thing came to pass according to his wish. For Messer Lotto Gualandi gave him to wife a daughter of his, Bartolomea by name, one of the fairest and handsomest young ladies of Pisa, albeit there be few there that are not very lizards to look upon. The judge accordingly brought her home with the utmost pomp, and having held a magnificent wedding, made shift the first night to hand her one venue for the consummation of the marriage, but came within an ace of making a stalemate of it, whereafter, lean and dry and scant of wind as he was, it behoved him on the morrow bring himself back to life with malmsey and restorative confections and other remedies. Thenceforward, being now a better judge of his own powers than he was, he fell to teaching his wife a calendar fit for children learning to read and belike made aforetime at Ravenna, for that, according to what he feigned to her, there was no day in the year but was sacred not to one saint only, but to many, in reverence of whom he showed by divers reasons that man and wife should abstain from carnal conversation. And to these be added, to boot, fast days and ember-days and the vigils of the apostles, and of 1,000 other saints and Fridays and Saturdays and Lord's Day, and all Lent and certain seasons of the moon and store of other exceptions, conceiving belike that it behoved to keep holiday with women in bed like, as he did bytimes whilst pleading in the courts of civil law. This fashion, to the no small chagrin of the lady, whom he handled maybe once a month, and hardly that, he followed a great while, still keeping straight watch over her, lest peradventure some other should teach her to know working days, even as he had taught her holidays. Things standing thus, it chanced that, the heat being great and Messer Rixardo having a mind to go a-pleasuring to a very fair country seat he had, near Monte Nero, and there abide some days to take the air, he betook himself thither, carrying with him his fair lady. Their sojourning, to give her some diversion, he caused one day fish, and they went out to sea in 2 boats, he in one with the fishermen, and she in another with other ladies. The sport luring them on, they drifted some miles out to sea, well nigh without perceiving it, and whilst they were intent upon their diversion, there came up of a sudden a galliot belonging to Paganino de Mare, a famous corsair of those days. The latter, espying the boats made for them, nor could they flee so fast but he overtook that in which were the women, and seeing therein the judge's fair lady, he carried her aboard the galliot, in full sight of Messer Rixaerdo, who was now come to land, and made off without recking of aught else. When my lord judge, who was so jealous that he misdoubted of the very air, saw this, it booteth not to ask if he was chagrined. And in vain, both at Pisa and otherwhere, did he complain of the villainy of the corsairs, for that he knew not who had taken his wife from him, nor whither he had carried her. As for Paganino, finding her so fair, he deemed himself in luck, and having no wife, resolved to keep her for himself. Accordingly, seeing her weeping sore, he studied to comfort her with soft words till nightfall, when, his calendar having dropped from his girdle and saints' days and holidays gone clean out of his head, he fell to comforting her with deeds, him seeming that words had availed little by day. And after such a fashion did he console her that, ere they came to Monaco, the judge and his ordinances had altogether escaped her mind, and she began to lead the merriest of lives with Paganino. The latter carried her to Monaco, and there, over and above the consolations with which he plied her night and day, he entreated her honorably as his wife. After a while, it came to Messer Rixaerdo's ears where his wife was, and he, being possessed with the most ardent desire to have her again, and bethinking himself that none other might thoroughly suffice to do what was needful to that end, resolved to go thither himself, determined to spend any quantity of money for her ransom. Accordingly, he set out by sea, and coming to Monaco, there both saw and was seen of the lady, who told it to Paganino that same evening, and acquainted him with her intent. Next morning Messer Rixaerdo, seeing Paganino, accosted him and quickly clapped up a great familiarity and friendship with him, whilst the other feigned not to know him, and waited to see at what he aimed. Accordingly, ween as it seemed to him time, Messer Rixaerdo discovered to him, as best and most civilly he knew, the occasion of his coming, and prayed him take what he pleased and restore him the lady. To which Paganino made answer with a cheerful countenance, "Sir, you are welcome, and to answer you briefly, I say thus. It is true I have a young lady in my house, if she be your wife or another's I know not, for that I know you not nor indeed her, save in so much as she hath abidden a while with me. If you be, as you say, her husband, I will, since you seem to me a civil gentleman, carry you to her, and I am assured that she will know you right well. If she say it is as you avouch and be willing to go with you, you shall, for the sake of your civility, give me what you yourself will to her ransom. But, an it be not so, you would do ill to seek to take her from me, for that I am a young man and can entertain a woman as well as another, and especially such an one as she, who is the most pleasing I ever saw." Quoth Messer Rixaerdo, "For certain she is my wife, and thou bring me where she is, thou shalt soon see it, for she will incontinent throw herself on my neck, wherefore I ask no better than that it be as thou proposest." "Then," said Paganino, "let us be going." Accordingly, they betook themselves to the corsair's house, where he brought the judge into a saloon of his, and let call the lady, who issued forth of a chamber, all dressed and tired, and came whereas they were, but accosted Messer Rixaerdo no otherwise than as she would any other stranger who might have come home with Paganino. The judge, who looked to have been received by her with the utmost joy, marveled sore at this, and fell a-saying in himself, "Belike the chagrin and long grief I have suffered, since I lost her, have so changed me that she knoweth me not." Wherefore he said to her, "Wife, it hath cost me dear to carry thee a-fishing, for that never was grief felt like that which I have suffered since I lost thee, and now meseemeth thou knowest me not, so distantly dost thou greet me. Seest thou not that I am thine own Messer Rixaerdo? Come hither to pay that which this gentleman, in whose house we are, shall require to thy ransom, and to carry thee away. And he, of his favor, restoreth thee to me for what I will." The lady turned to him and said, smiling somewhat, "Speak you to me, sir. Look, you mistake me not, for my part, I mind me not ever to have seen you." Quoth Rixaerdo, "Look what thou sayest, consider me well, and thou wilt but recollect thyself, thou wilt see that I am thine own Rixaerdo di Cinzica." "Sir," answered the lady, "you will pardon me, belike it is not so seemly a thing as you imagine for me to look much on you. Nevertheless, I have seen enough of you to know that I never before set eyes on you. Rixirdo, concluding that she did this for fear of Paganino, and chose not to confess to knowing him in the latter's presence, besought him of his favor that he might speak with her in a room alone. Paganino replied that he would well, but he would not kiss her against her will, and bade the lady go with him into a chamber, and there hear what he had to say, and answer him as it should please her. Accordingly, the lady and Messer Rixirdo went into a room apart, and as soon as they were seated, the latter began to say, Alack, heart of my body, sweet my soul and my hope, knowest thou not thy Rixirdo, who loveth thee more than himself? How can this be? Am I so changed? Prithee, fair mine eye, do but look on me a little. The lady began to laugh, and without letting him say more, replied, You may be assured that I am not so scatterbrained, but that I know well enough you are Messer Rixirdo di Cinzica, my husband. But what time I was with you, you showed that you knew me very ill, for that you should have had the sense to see that I was young and lusty and gamesome, and should consequently have known that which behoveth unto young ladies, over and above clothes and meat, albeit for shamefastness they name it not. The which how you performed, you know. If the study of the laws was more agreeable to you than your wife, you should not have taken her, albeit it never appeared to me that you were a judge. Nay, you seemed to me rather a common crier of saints' days and sacraments and fasts and vigils, so well you knew them. And I tell you this, that, had you suffered the husbandmen, who, till your lands keep as many holidays as you allowed him, who had the tilling of my poor little field, you would never have reaped the least grain of corn. However, as God, having compassion on my youth, hath willed it, I have happened on yonder man, with whom I abide in this chamber, wherein it is unknown what manner of thing is a holiday. I speak of those holidays which you, more assiduous in the service of God than in that of the ladies, did so diligently celebrate, nor ever yet entered in at this door Saturday, nor Friday, nor vigil, nor Imburday, nor Lent. That is so long. Nay, here swink we day and night, and thump our wool. And this very night after matin song, I know right well how the thing went, once he was up. Wherefore I mean to abide with him and work, whilst I am young, and leave saints' days and jubilees and fasts for my keeping when I am old. So get you gone about your business as quickly as you may, good luck go with you, and keep as many holidays as you please without me. Messer Rixirdo, hearing these words, was distressed beyond endurance, and said, ween as he saw she had made an end of speaking, Alack, sweet my soul, what is this thou sayest? Hast thou no regard for thy kinsfolk's honor, and thine own? Wilt thou rather abide here for this man's whore, and in mortal sin, than at Pisa as my wife? He, when he is weary of thee, will turn thee away to thine own exceeding reproach, whilst I will still hold thee dear and still. E'en though I willed it not, thou shalt be mistress of my house. Wilt thou, for the sake of a lewd and disorderly appetite, forsake then honor and me, who love thee more than my life? For God's sake, dear my hope, speak no more thus, but consent to come with me. Henceforth, since I know thy desire, I will enforce myself wherefore, sweet my treasure, change counsel and come away with me, who have never known weal since thou wast taken from me. Whereto answered the lady, I have no mind that any, now that it availeth not, should be more tender of my honor than I myself. Would my kinsfolk had regard thereto, weenas they gave me to you. But as they had then no care for my honor, I am under no present concern to be careful of theirs. And if I am herein mortar sin, I shall abide though it be in pestle sin. And let me tell you that here meseemeth I am Paganino's wife, whereas at Pisa meseemed I was your whore, seeing that there, by season of the moon and quadratures of geometry, needs must be planets concur to couple betwixt you and me, whereas here Paganino holdeth me all night in his arms and straineth me and biteth me, and how he serveth me, let God tell you for me. You say forsooth you will enforce yourself, to what? To do it in 3 casts, and cause it stand by dint of cudgelling. I warrant me, you are grown a doughty cavalier, since I saw you last. Begone and enforce yourself to live, for methinketh indeed you do but sojourn here below upon sufferance, so peaked and scant, wind you show to me. And yet more I tell you that, should he leave me, albeit meseemeth he is nowise inclined thereto, so I choose to stay. I purpose not therefore ever to return to you, of whom squeeze you as I might, there were no making a porringer of sauce. For that I abode with you once to my grievous hurt and loss, wherefore in such a case I should seek my vantage elsewhere. Nay, once again I tell you, here be neither saints' days nor vigils, wherefore here I mean to abide. So get you gone in God's name as quickly as you may, or I will cry out that you would fain force me. Messer Rixardo, seeing himself in ill case and now recognizing his folly in taking a young wife, ween as he was himself forspent, went forth the chamber tristful and woe-begone, and bespoke Paganino with many words that skilled not a jot. Ultimately, leaving the lady, he returned to Pisa, without having accomplished aught, and there for chagrin fell into such dotage that, as he went about Pisa, to whoso greeted him or asked him of any what, he answered naught but, "The ill hole will have no holidays." And there, no great while after, he died. Paganino, hearing this and knowing the love the lady bore himself, espoused her to his lawful wife and thereafter. Without ever observing saint's day or vigil or keeping Lent, they wrought what while their legs would carry them, and led a jolly life of it. Wherefore, dear my ladies, meseemeth Bernabo, in his dispute with Ambrogiolo, rode the she-goat down the steep. Footnote 141. According to one of the commentators of the Decameron, there are as many churches at Ravenna as days in the year, and each day is there celebrated as that of some saint or other. Footnote 142. A trifling jingle upon the similarity in sound of the words mortal, mortal, mortio, mortar, pestello, pestle, and pestilent, pestilential. The same wordplay occurs at least once more in the Decameron. Footnote 144, i.e. cunnis non vult furiari. Some commentators propose to read il mal furo, the ill thief, supposing Rixardo to allude to Paganino, but this seems far-fetched. Footnote 145, i.e. Semble ran headlong to destruction. The commentators explain this proverbial expression by saying that a she-goat is in any case a hazardous mount, and a fortiori when ridden down a precipice. But this seems a somewhat sporting kind of interpretation. This story gave such occasion for laughter to all the company that there was none whose jaws ached not therefore. And all the ladies avouched with one accord that Dionio spoke sooth, and that Bernabo had been an ass. But after the story was ended and the laughter abated, the queen, observing that the hour was now late and that all had told, and seeing that the end of her seigneury was come, according to the ordinance commenced, took the wreath from her own head and set it on that of Nephil, saying with a blithe aspect, "Henceforth, companion dear, be then the governance of this little people," and reseated herself. Nephil blushed a little at the honor received and became in countenance like as showeth a new-blown rose of April or of May in the breaking of the day, with lovesome eyes some little downcast, sparkling no otherwise than the morning star. But after the courteous murmur of the bystanders, whereby they gladsomely approved their goodwill towards the new-made queen, had abated and she had taken heart again, she seated herself somewhat higher than of wont and said, "Since I am to be your queen, I will, departing not from the manner holden of those who have foregone me, and whose governance you have by your obedience commended, make manifest to you in few words my opinion, which, and it be approved by your council, we will ensue. Tomorrow, as you know, is Friday, and the next day is Saturday, days which, by reason of the viands that are used therein, are somewhat irksome to most folk, more by token that Friday, considering that he who died for our life on that day suffered passion, is worthy of reverence. Wherefore I hold it a just thing and a seemly that, in honor of the divinity, we apply ourselves rather to orisons than to story-telling. As for Saturday, it is the usance of ladies on that day to wash their heads and do away all dust and all uncleanliness befallen them for the labors of the past week. And many, likewise, use, in reverence of the Virgin Mother of the Son of God, to fast and rest from all manner of work in honor of the ensuing Sunday. Wherefore, we being unable fully to ensue the order of living taken by us, on like wise methinketh we were well to rest from story-telling on that day also. After which, for that we shall then have sojourned here 4 days, I hold it opportune, and we would give no occasion for newcomers to intrude upon us, that we remove hence and get us gone elsewhither, where I have already considered and provided. There when we shall be assembled together on Sunday. After sleeping we, having today had leisure enough for discoursing at largi, have bethought myself at once that you may have more time to consider. And because it will be yet goodlier that the license of our story-telling be somewhat straitened, and that we devise of one of the many fashions of fortune that, our discourse, shall be of such as have, by dint of diligence, acquired some much desired thing or recovered some lost good. Whereupon let each think to tell somewhat that may be useful or at least entertaining to the company, saving always Dioneo his privilege. All commended the speech and disposition of the queen, and ordained that it should be as she had said. Then, calling for her seneschal, she particularly instructed him where he should set the tables that evening and after of what he should do during all the time of her seigneury. And this done, rising to her feet, she gave the company leave to do that which was most pleasing unto each. Accordingly, ladies and men betook themselves to a little garden, and there, after they had disported themselves a while, the hour of supper being come, they supped with mirth and pleasance. Then, all arising thence, and Emilia, by the queen's commandment, leading the round, the ditty following was sung by Pampinea, whilst the other ladies responded. What lady I should sing, and if not I, wam blessed with all for which a maid can sigh. Come then, O love, thou source of all my weal, all hope, and every issue glad and bright, sing ye a while iffer of sighs, nor bitter pains I erst did feel, that now but sweeten to me thy delight, nay, but of that fire clear, wherein I, burning, live in joy and cheer. And as my God, thy name do magnify. Thou saidst, love, before these eyes of mine Wena's thy fire I entered the first day, a youngling so beseen with valor, worth, and loveliness divine, that never might one find a goodlier, nay, nor yet his match, I ween. So sore I burnt for him, I still must and sing, blithe, of him with thee, my Lord most high. And that in him which crowneth my lease is that I please him, as he pleaseth me, thanks to love debonair. Thus in this world my wish I do possess, and in the next I trust at peace to be, through that fast faith I bear to him. Sure God, who seeth this, will ne'er the kingdom of his bliss to us deny. Footnote 146, i.e. Friday being a fast day, and Saturday a jour maigre. Footnote 147, i.e. generally upon the vicissitudes of fortune, and not upon any particular feature. After this they sang sundry other songs, and danced sundry dances, and played upon divers instruments of music. Then, the queen deeming it time to go to rest, each betook himself, with torches before him, to his chamber, and all on the 2 following days, whilst applying themselves to those things whereof the queen had spoken, looked longingly for Sunday. Here Eandth, the 2nd day of the Decameron. Day the 3rd. Here Bgineth, the 3rd day of the Decameron, wherein, under the governance of Neifile, is discoursed of such as have by dint of diligence acquired some much desired thing or recovered, some lost good. The dawn from vermeil began to grow orange-tawny at the approach of the sun, when on the Sunday the queen arose and caused all her company rise also. The seneschal had a great while before dispatched to the place whither they were to go store of things needful and folk, who should there make ready that which behoved. And seeing the queen now on the way, straightway let load everything else, as if the camp were raised thence, and with the household stuff and such of the servants as remained set out in rear of the ladies and gentlemen. The queen then with slow step, accompanied and followed by her ladies and the 3 young men and guided by the song of some score nightingales and other birds, took her way westward by a little-used footpath, full of green herbs and flowers, which latter now all began to open for the coming sun, and chatting, jesting, and laughing with her company, brought them a while before half-tierce, without having gone over 2,000 paces, to a very fair and rich palace, somewhat upraised above the plain upon a little knoll. Here they entered, and having gone all about and viewed the great saloons, and the quaint and elegant chambers all throughly furnished with that which pertaineth thereunto, they mightily commended the place, and accounted its lord magnificent. Then, going below and seeing the very spacious and cheerful court thereof, the cellars full of choicest wines, and the very cool water that welled there in great abundance, they praised it yet more. Thence, as if desirous of repose, they betook themselves to sit in a gallery which commanded all the courtyard, and was all full of flowers, such as the season afforded, and leafage, whereupon there came the careful seneschal and entertained, and refreshed them with costliest confections and wines of choice. Thereafter, letting open to them a garden, all walled about, which coasted the palace, they entered therein, and it seeming to them, at their entering, altogether wonder goodly, they addressed themselves more intently to view the particulars thereof. It had about it and athwart the middle very spacious alleys, all straight as arrows and embowered with trellises of vines, which made great show of bearing abundance of grapes that year, and being then all in blossom, yielded so rare a savor about the garden, that, as it blent with the fragrance of many another sweet-smelling plant that there gave scent, them seemed they were among all the spiceries that ever grew in the Orient. The sides of these alleys were all in a manner walled about with roses, red and white, and jessamine, wherefore not only of a morning, but what while the sun was highest, one might go all about, untouched thereby, neath odoriferous and delightsome shade. What and how many and how orderly disposed were the plants that grew in that place, it were tedious to recount. Suffice it that there is none goodly of those which may brook our air, but was there in abundance. Amiddleward the garden, what was not less, but yet more commendable than aught else there, was a plat of very fine grass, so green that it seemed well nigh black, enamelled all with belike 1,000 kinds of flowers, and closed about with the greenest and lustiest of orange and citron trees, the which, bearing at once old fruits and new and flowers, not only afforded the eyes a pleasant shade, but were no less grateful to the smell. Midmost the grass plat was a fountain of the whitest marble, enchased with wonder goodly sculptures, and thence whether I know not from a natural or an artificial source there sprang, by a figure that stood on a column in its midst, so great a jet of water, and so high towards the sky, whence not without a delectable sound it fell back into the wonder-limpid fount, that a mill might have wrought with less. The which after, I mean the water which overflowed the full basin, issued forth of the lawn by a hidden way, and coming to light there without, encompassed it all about by very goodly and curiously wroughten channels. Thence by like channels it ran through well nigh every part of the pleasance, and was gathered again at the last in a place, whereby it had issue from the fair garden, and whence it descended, in the clearest of streams, towards the plain. But ere it won thither, it turned 2 mills with exceeding power, and to the no small vantage of the Lord. The sight of this garden and its fair ordinance, and the plants and the fountain, with the rivulets proceeding therefrom, so pleased the ladies and the 3 young men that they all of one accord avouched that, and paradise might be created upon earth. They could not avail to conceive what form, other than that of this garden, might be given it, nor what farther beauty might possibly be added thereunto. However, as they went most gladsomely thereabout, weaving them the goodliest garlands of the various leafage of the trees, and hearkening the while to the carols of belike a score of different kinds of birds, that sang as if in rivalry one of other, they became aware of a delectable beauty, which, wonder-stricken as they were with the other charms of the place, they had not yet noted. To wit, they found the garden full of maybe 100 kinds of goodly creatures, and one showing them to other, they saw on one side rabbits issue, on another hares run. Here lay kids and their fawns went grazing, and there was many another kind of harmless animal, each going about his pastime at his pleasure, as if tame, the which added unto them a yet greater pleasure than the others. After they had gone about their fill, viewing now this thing and now that, the queen let set the tables around the fair fountain, and at her commandment, having first sung 6 canzonets and danced sundry dances, they sat down to meat. There, being right well and orderly served, after a very fair and sumptuous and tranquil fashion, with goodly and delicate viands, they waxed yet blither and arising thence, gave themselves anew to music-making and singing and dancing, till it seemed good to the queen that those whom it pleased should betake themselves to sleep. Accordingly some went thither, whilst others, overcome with the beauty of the place, willed not to leave it, but abiding there addressed themselves, some to reading romances and some to playing chess or tables, whilst the others slept. But presently, the hour of none being past, and the sleepers having arisen and refreshed their faces with cold water, they came all, at the queen's commandment, to the lawn hard by the fountain, and there seating themselves, after the wonted fashion, waited to fall to story-telling upon the subject proposed by her. The first upon whom she laid this charge was Philostrato, who began on this wise. Footnote 149, i.e. half before, not half after tierce or 7:30 a.m. Cf. the equivalent German idiom, halbrecht, 7.3 not 8.3 a.m. The first story. Maectto of Lamprioricchio, Feigneth himself, dumb and becometh gardener to a convent of women, who all flock to lie with him. Fairest ladies, There be many men and women foolish enough to believe that Weena's the white fillet is bound about a girl's head and the black cowl clapped upon her back. She is no longer a woman and is no longer sensible of feminine appetites, as if the making her a nun had changed her to stone. And if perchance they hear aught contrary to this their belief, they are as much incensed as if a very great and heinous misdeed had been committed against nature, considering not neither having regard to themselves, whom full license to do that which they will availeth not to sate, nor yet to the much potency of idlesse and thought-taking. On like wise, there are but too many who believe that spade and mattock and coarse victuals and hard living do altogether purge away carnal appetites from the tillers of the earth, and render them exceeding dull of wit and judgment. But how much all who believe thus are deluded, I purpose, since the Queen hath commanded it to me, to make plain to you in a little story, without departing from the theme by her appointed. Footnote 151, Solitude. The commentators will have it that this is an error for solitude, but I see no necessity for the substitution, the text being perfectly acceptable as it stands. There was, and is yet, in these our parts a convent of women, very famous for sanctity, the which, that I may not anywise abate its repute, I will not name, where in no great while agone, there being then no more than 8 nuns and an abbess, all young in the nunnery. A poor silly dolt of a fellow was gardener of a very goodly garden of theirs, who, being miscontent with his wage, settled his accounts with the ladies' bailiff and returned to Lamperecchio, whence he came. There, amongst others who welcomed him home, was a young labouring man, stout and robust, and for a countryman a well-favoured fellow, by name of Mazzetto, who asked him where he had been so long. The good man, whose name was Nudo, told him, whereupon Mazzetto asked him in what he had served the convent, and he, I tended a great and goodly garden of theirs, and moreover I went while to the coppice for faggots, and drew water, and did other such small matters of service. But the nuns gave me so little wage that I could scare find me in shoon withal. Besides, they are all young, and methinketh they are possessed of the devil, for there was no doing anything to their liking. Nay, when I was at work whiles in the courtyard, quoth one, set this here, and another, set that here. And a third snatched the spade from my hand, saying, that is not. Brief, they gave me so much vexation that I would leave work be and be gone out of the courtyard, insomuch that, what with one thing and what with another, I would abide there no longer and took myself off. When I came away, their bailiff besought me, and I could lay my hand on anyone apt unto that service, to send the man to him, and I promised it him. But may God make him sound of the loins as he whom I shall get him, else will I send him none at all. Mazzetto, hearing this, was taken with so great a desire to be with these nuns that he was all consumed therewith, judging from Nudo's words that he might avail to compass somewhat of that which he desired. However, foreseeing that he would fail of his purpose, if he discovered aught thereof to Nudo, he said to the latter, Egad, thou didst well to come away. How is a man to live with women? He were better abide with devils. 6 times out of 7 they know not what they would have themselves. But, after they had made an end of their talk, Mazzetto began to cast about what means he should take to be with them, and feeling himself well able to do the offices of which Nudo had spoken, he had no fear of being refused on that head, but misdoubted him he might not be received, for that he was young and well looked. Wherefore, after pondering many things in himself, he bethought himself thus, the place is far hence and none knoweth me there, and I can but make a show of being dumb, I shall for certain be received there. Having fixed upon this device, he set out with an axe he had about his neck, without telling any whither he was bound, and betook himself, in the guise of a beggarman, to the convent, where being come, he entered in and as luck would of it, found the bailiff in the courtyard. Him he accosted with signs such as dumb folk use, and made a show of asking food of him for the love of God, and that in return he would, and it were needed, cleave wood for him. The bailiff willingly gave him to eat and after set before him divers logs that Nudo had not availed to cleave, but of all which Mazzetto, who was very strong, made a speedy dispatch. By and by, the bailiff, having occasion to go to the coppice, carried him thither and put him to cutting faggots. After which, setting the ass before him, he gave him to understand by signs that he was to bring them home. This he did very well, wherefore the bailiff kept him there some days, so he might have him do certain things for which he had occasion. One day it chanced that the abbess saw him, and asked the bailiff who he was. Madam, answered he, "This is a poor deaf and dumb man, who came hither the other day to ask an alms. So I took him in out of charity, and have made him do sundry things of which we had need. If he knew how to till the courtyard and chose to abide with us, I believe we should get good service of him. For that we lack such an one, and he is strong, and we could make what we would of him. More by token that you would have no occasion to fear his playing the fool with yonder lasses of yours." "I faith," rejoined the abbess, "thou say'st sooth. Learn if he knoweth how to till and study to keep him here. Give him a pair of shoes and some old hood or other, and make much of him, caress him, give him plenty to eat." Which the bailiff promised to do. Misetto was not so far distant, but he heard all this, making a show the while of sweeping the courtyard, and said merrily in himself, "And you put me therein, I will till you your courtyard as it was never tilled yet." Accordingly, the bailiff, seeing that he knew right well how to work, asked him by signs if he had a mind to abide there, and he replied on like wise that he would do whatsoever he wished. Whereupon the bailiff engaged him and charged him till the courtyard, showing him what he was to do. After which he went about other business of the convent and left him. Presently, as Misetto went working one day after another, the nuns fell to plaguing him and making mock of him, as ofttimes it betideth that folk do with mutes, and bespoke him the naughtiest words in the world, thinking he understood them not. Whereof the abbess, mayhap supposing him to be tailless as well as tongueless, recked little or nothing. It chanced one day, however, that, as he rested himself after a hard morning's work, 2 young nuns, who went about the garden, drew near the place where he lay and fell to looking upon him, whilst he made a show of sleeping. Presently quoth one who was somewhat the bolder of the twain to the other, "If I thought thou wouldst keep my counsel, I would tell thee a thought which I have once and again had, and which might perchance profit thee also." "Speak in all assurance," answered the other, "for certes I will never tell it to any." Then said the forward wench, "I know not if thou have ever considered how straitly we are kept, and how no man dare ever enter here, save the bailiff, who is old, and yonder dumb fellow. And I have again and again heard ladies, who come to visit us, say that all other delights in the world are but toys in comparison with that which a woman enjoyeth, ween as she hath to do with a man. Wherefore I have often had it in mind to make trial with this mute, since with others I may not, if it be so. And indeed he is the best in the world to that end, for that, e'en if he would, he could not nor might tell it again. Thou seest he is a poor silly lout of a lad, who hath overgrown his wit, and I would fain hear how thou deemest of the thing." "Alack," rejoined the other, "what is this thou sayest? Knowest thou not that we have promised our virginity to God?" "Oh, as for that," answered the first, "how many things are promised him all day long, whereof not one is fulfilled unto him? And we have promised it him, let him find himself another or others to perform it to him. Or if," went on her fellow, "we should prove with child, how would it go then?" Quoth the other, "Thou beginnest to take thought unto ill ere it cometh. When that betideth, then will we look to it. There will be 1,000 ways for us of doing, so that it shall never be known, provided we ourselves tell it not." The other, hearing this, and having now a greater itch than her companion to prove what manner beast a man was, said, "Well then, how shall we do?" Quoth the first, "Thou seest it is nigh upon none, and methinketh the sisters are all asleep, save only ourselves. Let us look about the courtyard if there be any there. And if there be none, what have we to do but to take him by the hand and carry him into yonder hut, whereas he harboureth against the rain, and there let one of us abide with him, whilst the other keepeth watch. He is so simple that he will do whatever we will." Misetto heard all this talk, and disposed to compliance, waited but to be taken by one of the nuns. The latter having looked well all about, and satisfied themselves that they could be seen from nowhere, she who had broached the matter came up to Misetto and aroused him, whereupon he rose incontinent to his feet. The nun took him coaxingly by the hand and led him, grinning like an idiot, to the hut, where, without overmuch pressing, he did what she would. Then, like a loyal comrade, having had her will, she gave place to her fellow, and Misetto, still feigning himself a simpleton, did their pleasure. Before they departed thence, each of the girls must needs once more prove how the mute could horse it, and after devising with each other, they agreed that the thing was as delectable as they had heard, nay, more so. Accordingly, watching their opportunity, they went oftentimes at fitting seasons to divert themselves with the mute, till one day it chanced that one of their sisters, espying them in the act from the lattice of her cell, showed it to other twain. At first they talked of denouncing the culprits to the abbess, but after, changing counsel and coming to an accord with the first two, they became sharers with them in Mazzetto's services. And to them, the other 3 nuns were at divers times and by divers chances added as associates. Ultimately, the abbess, who had not yet gotten wind of these doings, walking one day alone in the garden, the heat being great, found Mazzetto, who had enough of a little fatigue by day, because of overmuch posting it by night, stretched out asleep under the shade of an almond tree, and the wind lifting the forepart of his clothes, all abode discovered. The lady, beholding this and seeing herself alone, fell into that same appetite which had got hold of her nuns, and arousing Mazzetto, carried him to her chamber, where, to the no small miscontent of the others, who complained loudly that the gardener came not to till the courtyard, she kept him several days, proving and reproving that delight which she had erst been wont to blame in others. At last she sent him back to his own lodging, but was fain to have him often again, and as, moreover, she required of him more than her share, Mazzetto, unable to satisfy so many, bethought himself that his playing the mute might, and it endured longer, result in his exceeding great hurt. Wherefore, being one night with the abbess, he gave loose to his tongue and bespoke her thus: Madam, I have heard say that 1 cock sufficeth unto 50 hens, but that 50 men can ill or hardly satisfy 1 woman, whereas needs must I serve 9, and to this I can no wise endure. Nay, for that which I have done up to now, I am come to such a pass that I can do neither little nor much. Wherefore do ye either let me go in God's name, or find a remedy for the matter. The abbess, hearing him speak whom she held dumb, was all amazed and said, What is this? Methought thou wast dumb. Madam, answered Mazzetto, I was indeed dumb, not by nature, but by reason of a malady which bereft me of speech, and only this very night for the first time do I feel it restored to me, wherefore I praise God as most I may. The lady believed this, and asked him what he meant by saying that he had to serve 9. Mazzetto told her how the case stood, whereby she perceived that she had no nun but was far wiser than herself. But, like a discreet woman as she was, she resolved to take counsel with her nuns to find some means of arranging the matter, without letting Mazzetto go, so the convent might not be defamed by him. Accordingly, having openly confessed to one another that which had been secretly done of each, they all of one accord, with Mazzetto's consent, so ordered it that the people round about believed speech to have been restored to him, after he had long been mute, through their prayers, and by the merits of the saint in whose name the convent was intituled, and their bailiff being lately dead. They made Mazzetto bailiff in his stead, and apportioned his toils on such wise that he could endure them. Thereafter, albeit he began upon them monikins galore, the thing was so discreetly ordered that nothing took vent thereof till after the death of the abbess, when Mazzetto began to grow old and had a mind to return home rich. The thing becoming known, enabled him lightly to accomplish his desire, and thus Mazzetto, having by his foresight contrived to employ his youth to good purpose, returned in his old age, rich and a father, without being at the pains or expense of rearing children, to the place whence he had set out with an axe about his neck, avouching that thus did Christ entreat whoso set horns to his cap. Footnote 152. Courtyard ordo is the old form of orchard, properly an enclosed tract of land in which fruit, vegetables and potherbs are cultivated for use, i.e. the modern kitchen garden and orchard in one, as distinguished from the pleasaunce or flower garden, jardin. The second story. A horsikper with the wife of King Aglulf, who, becoming aware thereof, without word said, findthim out and pollethhim. But the polled man polleth all his fellows on likewise and soescpth ilhap. The end of Philostrato's story, whereat whiles the ladies had some little blushed and other whiles laughed, being come, it pleased the queen that Pampinea should follow on with the story. And she accordingly, beginning with a smiling countenance, said, Some are so little discreet in seeking at all hazards to show that they know and apprehend that which it concerneth them not to know, that whiles, rebuking to this end unperceived defects in others, they think to lessen their own shame, whereas they do infinitely augment it. And that this is so I purpose, lovesome ladies, to prove to you by the contrary thereof, showing you the astuteness of one who, in the judgment of a king of worth and valor, was held belike of less account than Mazzetto himself. Agilulf, king of the Lombards, as his predecessors had done, fixed the seat of his kingship at Pavia, a city of Lombardy, and took to wife Theodelinda the widow of Autari, likewise king of the Lombards, a very fair lady and exceeding discreet and virtuous, but ill-fortuned in a lover. The affairs of the Lombards having, thanks to the valor and judgment of King Agilulf, been for some time prosperous and in quiet, it befell that one of the said queen's horsekeepers, a man of very low condition in respect of birth, but otherwise of worth far above so mean a station, and comely of person and tall as he were the king, became beyond measure enamored of his mistress. His mean estate hindered him not from being sensible that this love of his was out of all reason, wherefore, like a discreet man as he was, he discovered it unto none, nor dared he make it known to her even with his eyes. But albeit he lived without any hope of ever winning her favor, yet inwardly he gloried in that he had bestowed his thoughts in such high place, and being all aflame with amorous fire, he studied, beyond every other of his fellows, to do whatsoever he deemed might pleasure the queen. Whereby it befell that, weenas she had occasion to ride abroad, she liefer mounted the palfrey of which he had charge than any other. And when this happened, he reckoned it a passing great favor to himself, nor ever stirred from her stirrup, accounting himself happy what time he might but touch her clothes. But as often enough we see it happen that, even as hope groweth less, so love waxeth greater, so did it betide this poor groom, insomuch that sore uneath it was to him to avail to brook his great desire, keeping it, as he did, hidden and being upheld by no hope. And many a time, unable to rid himself of that his love, he determined in himself to die. And considering inwardly of the manner, he resolved to seek his death on such wise that it should be manifest he died for the love he bore the queen, to which end he bethought himself to try his fortune in an enterprise of such a sort as should afford him a chance of having or all or part of his desire. He set not himself to seek to say aught to the queen nor to make her sensible of his love by letters, knowing he should speak and write in vain, but chose rather to essay and he might by practice avail to lie with her. Nor was there any other shift for it, but to find a means how he might, in the person of the king, who, he knew, lay not with her continually, contrive to make his way to her and enter her bedchamber. Accordingly, that he might see on what wise and in what habit the king went, ween as he visited her, he hid himself several times by night in a great saloon of the palace, which lay between the king's bedchamber and that of the queen, and one night, amongst others, he saw the king come forth of his chamber, wrapped in a great mantle, with a lighted taper in one hand and a little wand in the other, and making for the queen's chamber, strike once or twice upon the door with the wand, without saying aught. Whereupon it was incontinent opened to him, and the taper taken from his hand. Noting this, and having seen the king return after the same fashion, he bethought himself to do likewise. Accordingly, finding means to have a cloak like that which he had seen the king wear, together with a taper and a wand, and having first well washed himself in a bagnio, lest haply the smell of the muck should offend the queen or cause her smoke the cheat, he hid himself in the great saloon, as of wont. Weenas he knew that all were asleep, and it seemed to him time either to give effect to his desire or to make his way by high emprise to the wished-for death. He struck a light with a flint and steel he had brought with him, and kindling the taper, wrapped himself fast in the mantle. Then, going up to the chamber door, smote twice upon it with the wand. The door was opened by a bedchamber woman, all sleepy-eyed, who took the light and covered it, whereupon, without saying aught, he passed within the curtain, put off his mantle and entered the bed where the queen slept. Then, taking her desirefully in his arms and feigning himself troubled, for that he knew the king's wont to be that, weenas he was troubled, he cared not to hear aught, without speaking or being spoken to, he several times carnally knew the queen. After which, grievous as it seemed to him to depart, yet, fearing lest his too long stay should be the occasion of turning the gotten delight into dollar, he arose and taking up the mantle and the light, withdrew, without word said, and returned, as quickly as he might, to his own bed. He could scarce yet have been therein when the king arose and repaired to the queen's chamber, whereat she marveled exceedingly. And as he entered the bed and greeted her blithely, she took courage by his cheerfulness and said, "O my lord, what new fashion is this of tonight? You left me but now, after having taken pleasure of me beyond your wont, and do you return so soon? Have a care what you do." The king, hearing these words, at once concluded that the queen had been deceived by likeness of manners and person, but like a wise man bethought himself forthright, seeing that neither she nor any else had perceived the cheat, not to make her aware thereof, which many simpletons would not have done, but would have said, "I have not been here, I. Who is it hath been here? How did it happen? Who came hither?" Whence many things might have arisen, whereby he would needlessly have afflicted the lady and given her ground for desiring another time that which she had already tasted, more by token that, and he kept silence of the matter, no shame might revert to him, whereas, by speaking, he would have brought dishonor upon himself. The king then, more troubled at heart than in looks or speech, answered, saying, "Wife, seem I not to you man enough to have been here a first time and to come yet again after that?" "Ay, my lord," answered she. "Nevertheless, I beseech you of regard to your health," quoth Agilulf, "and it pleaseth me to follow your counsel, wherefore for the nonce I will get me gone again, without giving you more annoy." This said, taking up his mantle, he departed the chamber, with a heart full of wrath and despite for the affront that he saw had been done him, and bethought himself quietly to seek to discover the culprit, concluding that he must be of the household and could not, whoever he might be, have issued forth of the palace. Accordingly, taking a very small light in a little lantern, he betook himself to a very long gallery that was over the stables of his palace, and where all his household slept in different beds. And judging that, whoever he might be that had done what the queen said, his pulse and the beating of his heart for the swink endured could not yet have had time to abate, he silently, beginning at one end of the gallery, fell to feeling each one's breast, to know if his heart beat high. Although every other slept fast, he who had been with the queen was not yet asleep, but seeing the king come and guessing what he went seeking, fell into such a fright that to the beating of the heart caused by the late-had fatigue, fear added yet a greater, and he doubted not but the king, if he became aware of this, would put him to death without delay, and many things passed through his thought that he should do. However, seeing him all unarmed, he resolved to feign sleep and await what he should do. Agilulf, then, having examined many and found none whom he judged to be he of whom he was in quest, came presently to the horsekeeper, and feeling his heart beat high, said in himself, "This is the man." Nevertheless, and he would have not be known of that which he purposed to do, he did not to him but pull, with a pair of scissors he had brought with him, somewhat on one side of his hair, which they then wore very long, so by that token he might know him again on the morrow. And this done, he withdrew and returned to his own chamber. The culprit, who had felt all this, like a shrewd fellow as he was, understood plainly enough why he had been thus marked, wherefore he arose without delay, and finding a pair of shears, whereof it chanced there were several about the stables for the service of the horses, went softly up to all who lay in the gallery and clipped each one's hair on like wise over the ear, which having done without being observed, he returned to sleep. When the king arose in the morning, he commanded that all his household should present themselves before him, or ever the palace doors were opened, and it was done as he said. Then, as they all stood before him with uncovered heads, he began to look that he might know him whom he had polled. But seeing the most part of them with their hair clipped after one and the same fashion, he marveled and said in himself, "He whom I seek, for all he may be of mean estate, showeth right well he is of no mean wit." Then, seeing that he could not, without making a stir, avail to have him whom he sought, and having no mind to incur a great shame for the sake of a paltry revenge, it pleased him with one sole word to admonish the culprit and show him that he was ware of the matter. Wherefore, turning to all who were present, he said, "Let him who did it do it no more, and get you gone in peace." Another would have been for giving them the strapado, for torturing, examining, and questioning, and doing this, would have published that which every one should go about to conceal. And having thus discovered himself, though he should have taken entire revenge for the affront suffered, his shame had not been minished, nay, were rather much enhanced therefore, and his lady's honor sullied. Those who heard the king's words marveled and long debated amongst themselves what he meant by this speech. But none understood it, save he whom it concerned, and he, like a wise man, never, during Agilulf's lifetime, discovered the matter nor ever again committed his life to the hazard of such a venture. Footnote 155. Boccaccio calls her Tutolinga, but I know of no authority for this form of the name of the famous Longobardian queen. Footnote 156, referring apparently to the adventure related in the present story. Footnote 157, lit. With high i.e. worthy, cause con alta cagione. The third story. Under color of confession and of exceeding niceness of conscience, a lady, being enamored of a young man, bringeth a grave friar, without his misdoubting him thereof, to afford a means of giving entire effect to her pleasure. Pampinea being now silent, and the daring and subtlety of the horsekeeper having been extolled by several of the company, as also the king's good sense, the queen, turning to Philomela, charged her follow on. Whereupon she blithely began to speak thus: I purpose to recount to you a cheat which was in very deed put by a fair lady upon a grave friar, and which should be so much the more pleasing to every layman as these, albeit for the most part very dull fools and men of strange manners and usances, hold themselves to be in everything both better worth and wiser than others, whereas they are of far less account than the rest of mankind, being men who, lacking of the meanness of their spirit, the ability to provide themselves, take refuge, like swine, whereas they may have what to eat. And this story, charming ladies, I shall tell you, not only for the ensuing of the order imposed, but to give you to know withal that even the clergy, to whom we women, beyond measure credulous as we are, yield overmuch faith, can be and are whiles adroitly befooled, and that not by men only, but even by certain of our own sex. In our city, the which is fuller of cozenage than of love or faith, there was, not many years agone, a gentlewoman adorned with beauty and charms, and as richly endowed by nature as any of her sex with engaging manners and loftiness of spirit and subtle wit, whose name albeit I know, I purpose not to discover it, no, nor any other that pertaineth unto the present story. For that there be folk yet alive who would take it in despite, whereas it should be passed over with a laugh. This lady then, seeing herself, though of high lineage, married to a woolmonger and unable, for that he was a craftsman, to put off the haughtiness of her spirit, whereby she deemed no man of mean condition, how rich soever he might be, worthy of a gentlewoman, and seeing him moreover, for all his wealth, to be apt unto nothing of more moment than to lay a warp for a piece of motley, or let weave a cloth or chaffer with a spinster and her yarn, resolved on no wise to admit of his embraces, save in so far as she might not deny him, but to seek, for her own satisfaction, to find someone who should be worthier of her favors than the woolmonger appeared to her to be, and accordingly fell so fervently in love with a man of very good quality and middle age, that, ween as she saw him not by day, she could not pass the ensuing night without unease. The gentleman, perceiving not how the case stood, took no heed of her, and she, being very circumspect, dared not make the matter known to him by sending of women nor by letter, fearing the possible perils that might betide. However, observing that he companied much with a churchman, who, albeit a dull lump of a fellow, was nevertheless, for that he was a man of very devout life, reputed of well-nigh almost worthy friar, she bethought herself that this latter would make an excellent go-between herself and her lover, and having considered what means she should use, she repaired, at a fitting season, to the church where he abode, and letting call him to her, told him that, an he pleased, she would fain confess herself to him. The friar, seeing her and judging her to be a woman of condition, willingly gave ear to her, and she, after confession, said to him, Father mine, it behoveth me have recourse to you for aid and counsel anent that which you shall hear. Know, as having myself told you, that you know my kinsfolk and my husband, who loveth me more than his life, nor is there aught I desire but I have it of him incontinent, he being a very rich man and one who can well afford it. Wherefore I love him more than mine own self, and should I but think, let alone do, aught that might be contrary to his honor and pleasure, there were no woman more wicked or more deserving of the fire than I. Now one, whose name in truth I know not, but who is, meseemeth, a man of condition, and is, if I mistake not, much in your company a well-favored man, and tall of his person, and clad in very decent sad-colored raiment, unaware belike of the constancy of my purpose, appeareth to have laid siege to me. Nor can I show myself at door or window, nor go without the house. But he incontinent presenteth himself before me, and I marvel that he is not here now. Whereat I am sore concerned, for that such fashions as these often bring virtuous women into reproach, without their fault. I have whiles had it in mind to have him told of this by my brothers. But then I have bethought me that men oftentimes do messages on such wise that ill answers ensue, which give rise to words, and from words they come to deeds. Wherefore, lest mischief spring therefrom and scandal, have kept silence of the matter, and have determined to discover it to yourself rather than to another. At once, because meseemeth you are his friend, and for that it beseemeth you to rebuke not only friends, but strangers, of such things. I beseech you, therefore, for the one God's sake, that you rebuke him of this, and pray him leave these his fashions. There be women enough, who incline belike to these toys, and would take pleasure in being dogged and courted by him, whereas to me, who have no manner of mind to such matters, it is a very grievous annoy. So saying, she bowed her head as she would weep. The holy friar understood incontinent of whom she spoke, and firmly believing what she said to be true, greatly commended her righteous intent, and promised her to do on such wise that she should have no farther annoy from the person in question. And knowing her to be very rich, he commended to her works of charity and almsdeeds, recounting to her his own need. Quoth the lady, I beseech you thereof for God's sake, and should he deny, prithee scruple not to tell him that it was I who told you this and complained to you thereof. Then, having made her confession and gotten her penance, recalling the friar's exhortations to works of almsgiving, she stealthily filled his hand with money, praying him to say masses for the souls of her dead kinsfolk. After which she rose from his feet, and taking leave of him, returned home. Not long after up came the gentleman, according to his wont, and after they had talked a while of one thing and another, the friar, drawing his friend aside, very civilly rebuked him of the manner in which, as he believed, he pursued and spied upon the lady aforesaid, according to that which she had given him to understand. The other marveled, as well he might, having never set eyes upon her, and being used very rarely to pass before her house, and would have excused himself. But the friar suffered him not to speak, saying, Now make no show of wonderment, nor waste words in denying it, for it will avail thee nothing. I learnt not these matters from the neighbors. Nay, she herself told them to me, complaining sore of thee. And besides that such toys beseem not a man of thine age, I may tell thee this much of her, that if ever I saw a woman averse to these follies, it is she. Wherefore, for thine own credit and her comfort, I prithee desist therefrom, and let her be in peace. The gentleman, quicker of wit than the friar, was not slow to apprehend the lady's device, and feigning to be somewhat abashed, promised to meddle no more with her thenceforward. Then, taking leave of the friar, he betook himself to the house of the lady, who still abode await at a little window, so she might see him, should he pass that way. When she saw him come, she showed herself so rejoiced and so gracious to him, that he might very well understand that he had gathered the truth from the friar's words. And thenceforward, under color of other business, he began with the utmost precaution to pass continually through the street, to his own pleasure, and to the exceeding delight and solace of the lady. After a while, perceiving that she pleased him even as he pleased her, and wishful to inflame him yet more and to certify him of the love she bore him, she betook herself again, choosing her time and place, to the holy friar, and seating herself at his feet in the church, fell a-weeping. The friar, seeing this, asked her affectionately what was to do with her anew. Alack, father mine, answered she, that which aileth me is none other than yonder God-accursed friend of yours, of whom I complained to you the other day, for that methinketh he was born for my especial torment, and to make me do a thing, such that should never be glad again, nor ever after dare to seat myself at your feet. How? Cried the friar. Hath he not given over annoying thee? No, indeed, answered she. Nay, since I complained to you of him, as if of despite, maybe taking it ill that I should have done so, for every once he used to pass before my house, I verily believe he hath passed 7 times. And would to God, he were content with passing and spying upon me. Nay, he is grown so bold and so malapert that but yesterday he dispatched a woman to me at home with his idle tales and toys, and sent me a purse and a girdle, as if I had not purses and girdles galore. The which I took and take so ill that I believe, but for my having regard to the sin of it, and after for the love of you, I had played the devil. However, I contained myself, and would not do or say aught, whereof I should not first have let you know. Nay, I had already returned the purse and the girdle to the baggage who brought them, that she might carry them back to him, and had given her a rough dismissal. But after, fearing she might keep them for herself and tell him that I had accepted them, As I hear women of her fashion do wiles, I called her back and took them, full of despite, from her hands and have brought them to you. So you may return them to him and tell him I want none of his trash, for that, thanks to God and my husband, I have purses and girdles enough to smother him withal. Moreover, if hereafter he desist not from this, I tell you, as a father you must excuse me, but I will tell it, come what may, to my husband and my brothers. For I had far liefer he should brook an affront, if needs he must, than that I should suffer blame for him, wherefore let him look to himself. So saying, still weeping sore, she pulled out from under her surcoat a very handsome and rich purse and a quaint and costly girdle, and threw them into the lap of the friar, who, fully crediting that which she told him and incensed beyond measure, took them and said to her, Daughter, I marvel not that thou art provoked at these doings, nor can I blame thee therefore. But I much commend thee for following my counsel in the matter. I rebuked him the other day, and he hath ill performed that which he promised me. Wherefore, as well for that as for this that he hath newly done, I mean to warm his ears for him after such a fashion that methinketh he will give thee no farther concern. But do thou, God's benison on thee, suffer not thyself to be so overcome with anger that thou tell it to any of thy folk, for that overmuch harm might ensue thereof unto him. Neither fear thou lest this blame anywise ensue to thee, for I shall still, before both God and men, be a most constant witness to thy virtue. The lady made believe to be somewhat comforted, and leaving that talk, said, as one who knew his greed and that of his fellow churchmen, Sir, these some nights past there have appeared to me sundry of my kinsfolk, who ask naught but almsdeeds, and meseemeth they are indeed in exceeding great torment, especially my mother, who appeareth to me in such ill case and affliction that it is pity to behold. Methinketh she suffereth exceeding distress to see me in this tribulation with yonder enemy of God. Wherefore I would have you say me 40 masses of St. Gregory for her and their souls, together with certain of your own prayers, so God may deliver them from that penitential fire. So saying, she put a florin into his hand, which the Holy Father blithely received, and confirming her devoutness with fair words and store of pious instances, gave her his benison, and let her go. The lady being gone, the friar, never thinking how he was gulled, sent for his friend, who, coming and finding him troubled, at once divined that he was to have news of the lady, and awaited what the friar should say. The latter repeated that which he had before said to him, and bespeaking him anew angrily and reproachfully, rebuked him severely of that which, according to the lady's report, he had done. The gentleman, not yet perceiving the friar's drift, faintly enough denied having sent her the purse and the girdle, so as not to undeceive the friar, in case the lady should have given him to believe that he had done this. Whereat the good man was sore incensed, and said, How canst thou deny it, wicked man that thou art? See, here they are, for she herself brought them to me, weeping, look if thou knowest them. The gentleman feigned to be sore abashed, and answered, Yes, I do indeed know them, and I confess to you that I did ill, but I swear to you, since I see her thus disposed, that you shall never more hear a word of this. Brief, after many words, the numbskull of a friar gave his friend the purse and the girdle, and dismissed him, after rating him amen and beseeching him occupy himself no more with these follies, the which he promised him. The gentleman, overjoyed both at the assurance that himseemed he had of the lady's love and at the goodly gift, was no sooner quit of the friar than he betook himself to a place, where he made shift to let his mistress see that he had the one and the other thing. Whereat she was mightily rejoiced, more by token that herseemed her device went from good to better. She now awaited naught but her husband's going abroad to give completion to the work, and it befell not long after that it behoved him repair to Genoa on some occasion or other. No sooner had he mounted to horse in the morning and gone his way, than the lady betook herself to the holy man, and after many lamentations, said to him, weeping, Father mine, I tell you now plainly that I can brook no more. But, for that I promised you the other day to do naught, without first telling you, I am come to excuse myself to you. And that you may believe I have good reason both to weep and to complain, I will tell you what your friend, or rather devil incarnate, did to me this very morning, a little before matins. I know not what ill chance gave him to know that my husband was to go to Genoa yestermorn. Algates, this morning, at the time I tell you, he came into a garden of mine, and climbing up by a tree to the window of my bedchamber, which giveth upon the garden, had already opened the lattice and was for entering, when I of a sudden awoke and starting up, offered to cry out, nay, would assuredly have cried out. But that he, who was not yet within, besought me of mercy in God's name and yours, telling me who he was. Which when I heard, held my peace for the love of you, and naked as I was born, ran and shut the window in his face. Whereupon I suppose he took himself off, ill luck go with him, for I heard no more of him. Look you now if this be a goodly thing, and to be endured. For my part one mean to bear with him no more, nay, I have already forborne him overmuch for the love of you. The friar, hearing this, was the wrathfullest man alive, and knew not what to say, except to ask again and again if she had well certified herself that it was indeed he and not another, to which she answered, Praised be God. As if I did not yet know him from another. I tell you it was himself, and although he should deny it, credit him not. Then said the friar, Daughter, there is nothing to be said for it but that this was exceeding effrontery and a thing exceeding ill done, and in sending him off as thou didst that which it behoved thee to do. But I beseech thee, since God hath preserved thee from shame, that, like as thou hast twice followed my counsel, even so do thou yet this once. To wit, without complaining to any kinsman of thine, leave it to me to see an I can bridle yonder devil broke loose, whom I believed a saint. If I can make shift to turn him from this lewdness, well and good. If not, I give thee leave henceforth to do with him that which thy soul shall judge best, and my benison go with thee. Well then, answered the lady, for this once I will well not to vex or disobey you, but look you do on such wise that he beware of annoying me again, for I promise you I will never again return to you for this cause. Thereupon, without saying more, she took leave of the friar and went away, as if in anger. Hardly was she out of the church when up came the gentleman and was called by the friar, who, taking him apart, gave him the soundest rating ever man had, calling him disloyal and forsworn and traitor. The other, who had already twice had occasion to know to what the monk's reprimands amounted, abode expectant and studied with embarrassed answers to make him speak out, saying at the first, Why all this passion, sir? Have I crucified Christ? Whereupon, mark this shameless fellow, cried the friar. Hear what he saith. He speaketh as if a year or two were past, and he had for lapse of time forgotten his misdeeds and his lewdness. Hath it then escaped thy mind between this and matin song, that thou hast outraged someone this very morning? Where wast thou this morning a little before day? I know not, answered the gentleman, but wherever it was, the news thereof hath reached you mighty early. Quoth the friar, Certes, the news hath reached me. Doubtless thou supposedst, because her husband was abroad, that needs must the gentlewoman receive the incontinent in her arms. A fine thing indeed. Here's a pretty fellow. Here's an honorable man. He's grown a nighthawk, a garden breaker, a tree climber. Thinkest thou by importunity to overcome this lady's chastity, that thou climbest up to her window's annets by the trees? There is naught in the world so displeasing to her as thou, yet must thou e'en go a-saying it again and again. Truly, thou hast profited finely by my admonitions, let alone that she hath shown thee her aversion in many ways. But this I have to say to thee, she hath up to now, not for any love she beareth thee, but at my instant entreaty, kept silence of that which thou hast done. But she will do so no more. I have given her leave to do what seemeth good to her, and thou annoy her again in aught. What wilt thou do, and she tell her brothers? The gentleman, having now gathered enough of that which it concerned him to know, appeased the friar, as best he knew and might, with many and ample promises, and taking leave of him, waited till matin song of the ensuing night, when he made his way into the garden and climbed up by the tree to the window. He found the lattice open, and entering the chamber as quickly as he might, threw himself into the arms of his fair mistress, who, having awaited him with the utmost impatience, received him joyfully, saying, Gramercy to my lord the friar for that he so well taught thee the way hither. Then, taking their pleasure one of the other, they solaced themselves together with great delight, devising and laughing ain't the simplicity of the dolt of a friar, and jibing at wool hanks and teasels and carding combs. Moreover, having taken order for their future converse, they did on such wise that, without having to resort anew to my lord the friar, they foregathered in equal joyance many another night, to the like whereof I pray God, of his holy mercy, speedily to conduct me and all Christian souls who have a mind thereto. The fourth story. dom felic teachth, fra piusisio how he may become beatified by performing a certain penance of his fashion, which the other doth, and dom felic meanwhile leadth, a merry life of it with the good man's wife. Philomna, having made an end of her story, was silent, and Dioneo, having with dulcet speech mightily commended the lady's shrewdness and eke the prayer with which Philomna had concluded, the queen turned with a smile to Pamphilo and said, "Come, Pamphilo, continue our diversion with some pleasant trifle." Pamphilo promptly answered that he would well, and began thus. "Madam, there are many persons who, what while they study to enter paradise, unwittingly send others thither, the which happened, no great while since, to a neighbor of ours, as you shall hear. According to that which I have heard tell, there abode near San Pancrazio an honest man and a rich, called Puccio di Ranieri, who, devoting himself in his latter days altogether to religious practices, became a tertiary of the order of St. Francis, whence he was styled Fra Puccio, and ensuing this his devout life, much frequented the church, for that he had no family other than a wife and one maid, and consequently it behoved him not apply himself to any craft. Being an ignorant, clod-pated fellow, he said his paternosters, went to preachments and attended mass, nor ever failed to be at the lauds chanted by the seculars, and fasted and mortified himself. Nay, it was buzzed about that he was of the flagellants. His wife, whose name was Mistress Isabetta, a woman, yet young, of 18 to 30 years of age, fresh and fair and plump as a lady apple, kept, by reason of the piety and belike of the age of her husband, much longer and more frequent fasts than she could have wished, and when she would have slept or maybe frolicked with him, he recounted to her the life of Christ and the preachments of Fra Nastajo or the complaint of Mary Magdalene or the like. Meantime there returned home from Paris a monk hight Dom Felis, conventual of San Pancrazio, who was young and comely enough of person, keen of wit and a profound scholar, and with him Fra Puccio contracted a straight friendship. And for that this Dom Felis right well resolved him his every doubt, and knowing his pious turn of mind, made him a show of exceeding devoutness. Fra Puccio fell to carrying him home bytimes and giving him to dine and sup, as the occasion offered. And the lady also, for her husband's sake, became familiar with him and willingly did him honor. The monk then, continuing to frequent Fra Puccio's house, and seeing the latter's wife so fresh and plump, guessed what should be the thing whereof she suffered the most default, and bethought himself, and he might, to go about to furnish her withal himself, and so spare Fra Puccio fatigue. Accordingly, craftily casting his eyes on her, at one time and another, he made shift to kindle in her breast that same desire which he had himself, which when he saw, he bespoke her of his wishes as first occasion betided him. But albeit he found her well disposed to give effect to the work, he could find no means thereunto, for that she would on no wise trust herself to be with him in any place in the world save her own house, and there it might not be, seeing that Fra Puccio never went without the town. At this the monk was sore chagrined, but after much consideration he hit upon a device whereby he might avail to foregather with the lady in her own house, without suspect, for all Fra Puccio should be at home. Accordingly, the latter coming one day to visit him, he bespoke him thus: "I have many a time understood, Fra Puccio, that all thy desire is to become a saint, and to this end meseemeth thou goest about by a long road, whereas there is another and a very short one, which the Pope and the other great prelates, who know and practice it, will not have made known, for that the clergy, who for the most part live by alms, would incontinent be undone, inasmuch as the laity would no longer trouble themselves to propitiate them with alms or other what. But for that thou art my friend and hast very honorably entertained me, I would teach it thee, so I were assured thou wouldst practice it and wouldst not discover it to any living soul." Fra Puccio, eager to know the thing, began straightway to entreat him with the utmost instancy that he would teach it him, and then to swear that never, save in so far as it should please him, would he tell it to any, engaging, and if it were such as he might avail to follow, to address himself thereunto. Whereupon quoth the monk, "Since thou promisest me this, I will e'en discover it to thee. Thou must know that the doctors of the church hold that it behoveth whoso would become blessed to perform the penance which thou shalt hear. But understand me aright. I do not say that, after the penance, thou wilt not be a sinner like as thou presently art. But this will betide, that the sins which thou hast committed up to the time of the penance will all by virtue thereof be purged and pardoned unto thee. And those which thou shalt commit thereafterward will not be written to thy prejudice, but will pass away with the holy water, as venial sins do now. It behoveth a man, then, in the first place, weenas he cometh to begin the penance, to confess himself with the utmost diligence of his sins, and after this he must keep a fast and a very strict abstinence for the space of 40 days, during which time thou must abstain from touching, not to say other women, but even thine own wife. Moreover, thou must have in thine own house some place whence thou mayst see the sky by night, whither thou must betake thyself towards the hour of complines, and there thou must have a wide plank set up, on such wise that, standing upright, thou mayst lean thy loins against it, and keeping thy feet on the ground, stretch out thine arms, crucifix fashion. And thou wouldst rest them upon some peg or other, thou mayst do it, and on this wise thou must abide gazing upon the sky, without budging a jot, till matins. Wert thou a scholar, thou wouldst do well to repeat certain orisons I would give thee. But, as thou art it not, thou must say 300 paternosters and as many Ave Marys, in honor of the Trinity, and looking upon heaven, still have in remembrance that God is the creator of heaven and earth and the passion of Christ, abiding on such wise as he abode on the cross. When the bell ringeth to matins, thou mayst, and thou wilt, go and cast thyself, clad as thou art, on thy bed and sleep, and after in the forenoon, betake thyself to church and there hear at least 3 masses and repeat 50 paternosters and as many Aves. After which thou shalt with a single heart do all and sundry thine occasions, if thou have any to do, and dine and at evensong be in church again, and there say certain orisons which I will give thee by writ, and without which it cannot be done. Then towards complines do thou return to the fashion aforesaid, and thus doing, even as I have myself done aforetime, I doubt not but ere thou come to the end of the penance thou wilt, provided thou shalt have performed it with devoutness and compunction, feel somewhat marvellous of eternal beatitude. Quoth Fra Puccio, this is no very burdensome matter, nor yet overlong, and may very well be done, wherefore I purpose in God's name to begin on Sunday. Then, taking leave of him and returning home, he related everything in due order to his wife, having the others' permission therefore. The lady understood very well what the monk meant by bidding him stand fast without stirring till matins. Wherefore, the device seeming to her excellent, she replied that she was well pleased therewith, and with every other good work that he did for the health of his soul, and that, so God might make the penance profitable to him, she would e'en fast with him, but do no more. They being thus of accord and Sunday come, Fra Puccio began his penance, and my lord monk, having agreed with the lady, came most evenings to sup with her, bringing with him store of good things to eat and drink, and after lay with her till matin song, when he arose and took himself off, whilst Fra Puccio returned to bed. Now the place which Fra Puccio had chosen for his penance adjoined the chamber where the lady lay, and was parted therefrom, but by a very slight wall, wherefore, Master Monk wantoning it one night over freely with the lady and she with him, it seemed to Fra Puccio that he felt a shaking of the floor of the house. Accordingly, having by this said 100 of his paternosters, he made a stop there, and without moving, called to his wife to know what she did. The lady, who was of a waggish turn, and was then belike astride of San Benedetto his beast, or that of San Giovanni Gualberto, answered, I faith, husband mine, I toss as most I may. How? Quoth Fra Puccio. Thou tossest. What meaneth this tossing? The lady, laughing, for that she was a frolicsome dame and doubtless had cause to laugh, answered merrily, How? You know not what it meaneth. Why, have heard you say 1,000 times, who suppeth not by night must toss till morning light. Fra Puccio doubted not but that the fasting was the cause of her unableness to sleep, and it was for this she tossed thus about the bed. Wherefore, in the simplicity of his heart, Wife, said he, I told thee not to fast, but since thou wouldst and do it, think not of that, but address thyself to rest. Thou givest such vaults about the bed that thou makest all in the place shake. Have no care for that, answered the lady. I know what I am about. Do you but well, you, and I will do as well as I may. Fra Puccio, accordingly, held his peace and betook himself anew to his paternosters. And after that night, my lord monk and the lady let make a bed in another part of the house, wherein they abode in the utmost joyance what while Fra Puccio's penance lasted. At one and the same hour the monk took himself off, and the lady returned to her own bed, whereto a little after came Fra Puccio from his penance. And on this wise the latter continued to do penance, whilst his wife did her delight with the monk, to whom quoth she merrily, now and again, Thou hast put Fra Puccio upon performing a penance, whereby we have gotten paradise. Indeed, the lady, finding herself in good case, took such a liking to the monk's fare, having been long kept on low diet by her husband, that weenas Fra Puccio's penance was accomplished, she still found means to feed her fill with him elsewhere, and using discretion, long took her pleasure thereof. Thus then, that my last words may not be out of accord with my first, it came to pass that, whereas Fra Puccio, by doing penance, thought to win paradise for himself, he put therein the monk, who had shown him the speedy way thither, and his wife, who lived with him in great lack of that whereof Dom Fellis, like a charitable man as he was, vouchsafed her great plenty. Footnote 161, i.e. the canticles of praise chanted by certain lay confraternities, established for that purpose and answering to our pre-Reformation laud singers. Footnote 162, an order of lay penitents, who were wont at certain times to go masked about the streets, scourging themselves in expiation of the sins of the people. This expiatory practice was particularly prevalent in Italy in the middle of the 13th century. Footnote 164. Dom, contraction of Dominus, Lord. The title commonly given to the beneficed clergy in the Middle Ages, answering to our Sir as used by Shakespeare, e.g. Sir Hugh Evans the Welsh parson, Sir Topas the curate, etc. The expression survives in the title Domini, i.e. Domine Voc. Of Dominus, still familiarly applied to schoolmasters, who were of course originally invariably clergymen. Footnote 165. A conventual is a member of some monastic order attached to the regular service of a church, or, as would nowadays be said, a beneficed monk. Footnote 166. Sic. This confusion of persons constantly occurs in Boccaccio, especially in the conversational parts of the Decameron, in which he makes the freest use of the various forms of analogy and of other rhetorical figures, such as hyperbaton, synecdoche, etc., to the no small detriment of his style in the matter of clearness.